Okay, let's see if we can get this to work. That's off, that's off, that's off. That's on. It appears to be live. Okay. Let's do this then. Hello, Shadowcat back. And it's been a bit. I'm not even sure if people are going to show up because I think I might have accidentally set the, it for noon. Even though I swear I didn't do that, but I think it said something about noon. Either way, it's not going to be at noon. It's going to be now. This is the advantage of keeping like a schedule. Even if I scheduled the stream wrong in the studio, it should still happen at the same time every week, regardless. Unless, of course, I screwed things up, in which case then it doesn't happen every week at the same time, regardless. So, yeah, one way or another. Let me pop out the chat real quick, that way I can actually read it. Hey, it looks like some people actually did show up. JP's in. Hello, JP. Good to see you. Blizz is also in. Hello, Blizz. Good to see you. So, yeah, we're back here. We're doing this. Still got a few more episodes of ships to get through before we can move on to other stuff. And before we do that, I gotta go back and change a couple of things. Because after we got done with the last stream, I really sat down and looked at it and decided that I didn't like what we had done. And so changes had to be made. We'll go over those changes real quick because they're changes for the better. At least I think. Narratively speaking, mechanically speaking, I think they're going to be changes for the better because I had to fill in a few things that aren't really gone over in the show. I had to make some assumptions. I had to make some changes. So I think they're going to be changes for the better. Anyway, though, before we get started, of course, naturally, if you're here and you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. Go ahead and click the bell button. That way you get notified whenever I should be doing a video. I mean, might not always happen, apparently, but hey, you should at least get some kind of notification, right? If you know somebody else who's also into Babylon 5 or Starfinder, go ahead and share this video with them. Otherwise, though, if you like me and what I do, go ahead and leave a like on the video, leave a comment down below. However, if you're going to go ahead and leave a comment down below, might I implore you, okay, might I beg you, to go ahead and join the Discord. We have one. And if you want to play with us, and I really, really would like you to come and play with us, go ahead, join the Discord, go to the Behind the Screen channel, let me know what kind of game you want to play, and what your availability is, and once I have enough people together, we'll start a new game. We're currently playing a Star Trek module that is coming to an end, and we're already in discussions as to what our current group, or what this group rather, wants to do next. And that's undecided. They may stick with Star Trek, they could do a number of other things. I have a number of modules under my belt, and just because I have a number of modules under my belt, that does not preclude doing just a regular vanilla fantasy or sci-fi campaign. That can be done too. So, if you want to play, come and join us. Otherwise, we're going to get into everything. Hopefully, assuming that everything is still online and working, because it's been a rough morning. It's been a bit of a rough morning. I went through and I tried to update drivers, and now half of everything doesn't want to work. I mean, it seems to be working right now, but we'll have to see how long that lasts. So, let me go ahead and check on a couple of things here real quick before I turn everything back on. And what is this? Document's been changed by others. Save. Just save the... What is the point of having an autosave if it's going to be like this, okay? Don't be like that. Just don't be like that. Okay, anyway. Getting back to the Narn ships. It looks like everything is in order, so let's go ahead and bring in our browser. We're going to need that. We'll bring in the spreadsheet, and we'll go over the changes that I made to this between then and now, and we'll go into why I did that and what I've actually done. So, the last time that we were here, we worked on the Narn ships. We did the Jaquan class and the Bintak class. And let's see, if we come to the wiki, I can pull those up. Let's see. And JP says spreadsheets revolting. Well, they've always been revolting, but now they're rebelling. Let me close that side panel. Narn ships. So the Jaquan heavy cruiser is that one. And Bliss says, Viva la Revolution. Don't encourage them. So anyway, that's the Jaquan heavy cruiser, and... Oh, then we have a picture of the Bintak here. Anyway, we did those two. However, I was going back because I was really unhappy about something. The Thenor class and the Taloth class. Now, these are both essentially the same ship. The Taloth class is basically just two Thenors turned sideways and connected dorsal to dorsal. But the statistics on them, aside from mass, are basically the same. And since Starfinder doesn't keep track of mass, well, then there's not much else to do. So, they are the same ship, in every way possible. The problem is, however, that when we were building the Minbari ships, and we'll go back to them for just a moment, the Minbari ships are not exactly... numerous. They only have 3, really. And JP says, didn't we decide to play a Tyranid Warhammer campaign? No, you did not, because I said you're not allowed to play Tyranids. Okay? No NIDs. I mean, what would you even do? You're all gonna play a Termagant? You don't exactly get a whole lot of agency with the Termagant. They have an intelligence of 3. So, anyway, the Minbari, when we did them, we did their fighter, and we did the Charlin class, which we made into a battleship, which made sense. And then we did the White Star. Now, the problem with the White Star is that it is a very small ship that punches way above its weight class. And we had a hell of a time modeling that. I think I did a really good job, though. We made it into a destroyer. We gave it a capital beam on the front, as well as a heavy cannon and a light cannon. And that makes this thing very dangerous from the front. It's quick, it's maneuverable with the right pilot. And I like it. The problem came in that when we did the Narn vessels, the Thanor and the Taloth class are also both destroyers. And that didn't sit right with me, because that means that the White Star and the Thanor class are sitting in the same category. And when I say the same category, it's this. The White Star, when it was premiered, was notable for a couple of things. Number one, the Minbari-Vorlon technology blending. That made it one of the most advanced vessels of any of the younger races. Secondly, though, because it blends Vorlon technology with it, it was the smallest ship that was jump capable. Okay? Which means that the Thanor class being a destroyer didn't sit right with me, because if they're both destroyer frames, if they're both roughly the same size, then that means that the White Star really isn't all that special. And it was bothering me. It bothered me a lot. And so I said, well, when we did this, we started with the Bintak, and then we worked our way backwards. The Bintak we made into a carrier, the Jaquan was a carrier, and it was one size category less, because this is gargantuan, these are huge, this is large. And JP says that White Stars punch above their class. Yes, they do. However, even on their own, they're unique. So I looked at this and I said, I don't like it. I really, really just do not like it. And so I went back and I redid it. Okay? We kept everything basically the same. They still have the same weapons. And they still have the same carrier capacity. They still have the same weapons that they had before. But I changed the frame. So the Bintak is going to stay as a carrier. That one's fine. It's the Jaquan and the Thanor Thaloth class that have to change. So if we come over here, I went through and I redid them. And I stepped them both up by one stage. So, right here we have the new Thanor Thaloth class and the new Jaquan. And we can see that I've gone from large to huge and huge to gargantuan. These are both now cruisers, and this is now a battleship. And I chose battleship just because I wanted the Jaquan to be a little bit different than the Bintak. If the Bintak is a carrier, we'll make this one a battleship. I thought that would work out well. So immediately we can see a couple of big differences. The Thanor and Taloth class went from a tier 7 to a tier 9. And the Jaquan went from a tier 9 to a tier 16. Which actually puts it higher than the Bintak. I'm not sure how I feel about that. We may go back and re-look at the Bintak, but probably not. I'm happy with it. So I don't know why I would change anything there. It's a bit weird, but then again, this is a battleship, and so it's going to have a different role. JP says it's a frigate-sized battleship? No, and the Jaquan was never frigate-sized. At least I don't think it ever was. We can go back and look at that. List of ship classes. No, let's go to the tech sheet. The Jaquan class battlecruiser is 1.4 kilometers long. Okay, 1.4 kilometers long. That puts the Jaquan class on par with the Nova class dreadnought at 1.5. Oh, and JP says meant the White Star. No, the White Star is absolutely frigate sized. And yes, it is essentially a frigate sized battleship. Or essentially it's meant to take down battleships. The fact is that the White Stars, as we said before, the White Star is meant to fight above its weight. And so you send the White Stars in against battleships, and they use wolf pack tactics to drag them down. And if I did say White Star, I didn't mean it. I meant the Jaquan class. So yeah, with the Jaquan class, we can point out that it's on par with the Gargantuan Earth ships, so I have no problem making it into a battleship. Which makes the other ones cruisers. It does change the weapon emplacements. Because of that, the Jaquan does have some empty slots, but that's okay. And it also means that these cruisers have a bit better coverage, but they're actually a little bit lighter on the weapons. And JP says White Stars are more cruisers to me because they're small and fight in packs. Battleships would go solo. Well, yeah, then that is exactly what the White Stars do. Except they don't go solo. They go in packs, and I compared them to destroyers more than cruisers. Because if what I learned is correct, and I did my research on this one, so if I'm wrong, it's because I learned wrong. It's that on the scale of ships, and I even wrote it down. If we go back to the overview here, I wrote it down right here. And it was, this is just the blue water boats. Okay, this does not cover things like patrol craft and stuff like that that don't leave territorial waters. This is only blue water craft. Corvettes are basically the lightest blue water capable ship. And their entire job is to do nothing but harry other ships. So they get out and they pepper them up real good. They don't carry big cannons, but that doesn't mean they're not dangerous. They carry enough firepower to make them threatening on the absolute lightest frame possible. They're supposed to be quick, they're supposed to be maneuverable, agile, dexterous, hard to hit, and there you go. Now, frigates. Frigates, on the other hand, are a different doctrine. The Corvette wants you to go away, okay? So if you get too close, they send out a Corvette, they put a warning shot across your bow and just say, look, if you come closer, we're going to bring more. The frigate, on the other hand, is the exact opposite of that. It is also small enough to be agile and quick, but with a much different job. The Corvette wants you to leave. The frigate says, you had your chance and you're not doing that anymore. Okay, the frigate says that you're not going. You can surrender now, or we can put you at the bottom. And the destroyer is there for basically the same rule. The only difference is that they're a little bit slower, and they're here for one. They're not here to negotiate. If a destroyer shows up, you screwed up at some point. Now, the cruisers, on the other hand, from what I learned, are defensive ships. The cruiser is there primarily as the escort for whatever your centerpiece is, whether that's a battleship, whether that's a carrier, or whatever else it might be. I can't think of what else it would be if it's not a battleship or a carrier, but the cruiser is a defensive vessel. Can it chase things down? Sure, if the other ship is slow enough, but primarily it's just a big weapons platform. And it's there to stay in formation and lay down the fire to protect whatever it's there with. So when we look to classify what is the White Star, the White Star is either going to be a frigate or a destroyer. And since the destroyer frame works in the system, I do believe that they fit right in the destroyer category. If a White Star shows up, it's there for a reason. And that reason is generally, you're not supposed to be here and you're not leaving either. And let's not forget what these things were built for. They were built for the Shadow War, and they were built to kill Shadow vessels. The fact that they, work against basically everything else is just coincidental. Let's face it, if you were built to kill one of the deadliest and most advanced vessels in the universe that we know of, then, it's going to work on anything else. So, I feel really good about making the White Star into a destroyer, but that does mean that we needed to up the size category for all of the other ships, and so the Thanor and Taloth are going to become cruisers, and the Jaquan becomes a battleship, which kinda makes sense, too. The Jaquan is fully capable of operating on its own, and it does routinely. So, having it a battleship? Yeah. The other two, we don't really see much of them. But we can assume that they probably either work solo in, close range areas, we're talking like planets, moons, space stations, stuff like that, or they might work in small groups. Either way, I think it works. However, this does bring me to a problem, because we gotta figure out exactly what makes the White Star special then. And I started looking at the whole hyperspace system, because we haven't really done hyperspace yet, and I'm not getting into that today, but in Starfinder, every ship is capable of traveling in hyperspace, everything down to the smallest little fighter. If you can put a drift engine on it, you can enter the drift and you can travel, and the drift and hyperspace work really similar. It's really similar. And the same thing is true in Star Trek as well, because in Star Trek they have warp cores, and every shuttle has a warp core. Now, they don't travel at high warp, but they can go to warp. But the same is not true in Babylon 5. Babylon 5 has the hyperspace system. They use jump gates and jump engines. And the fact that the White Star could open its own jump point made it really special, which is why we did all this, and obviously I had to step everything up. However, there is one other destroyer that we made. And JP says, battleships primarily operate via standoff broadside tactics. Yes, they do. For that matter, so do cruisers most of the time. The Jaquan class, however, is actually primarily a head-on fighter, because it's got those capital beams forward, and then it's got a lot of port and starboard cannons. But that's fine. We're limited by things like hydrodynamics. Why do battleships broadside? Well, because our ships are long and narrow. Why are the ships long and narrow? Because that's the most hydrodynamic form that we've got. So, function follows form. But with a spacecraft, you're not necessarily limited to that. So, different doctrines. Anyway, as I was saying, destroyers. We did actually make one other destroyer. And we did it before the Minbari. We go back to the Earth vessels. So if we go all the way back, we have, of course, the Aurora Star Fury, the Thunderbolt Star Fury, and then the first capital ship we did was the Olympus class. What is the Olympus class? Well, if you don't remember what the Olympus class was, I don't blame you, because you only really see it like once or twice in the show, and that's about it. I mean, for that matter, that's like the best picture that we've got right there. That's an Olympus class. And we classified this, they call it a corvette. We classified it as a destroyer. But now we run into the same problem. If this is a destroyer, what makes this different from the White Star? What makes it special? And so with the Narn, we went ahead and we said, all right, we'll just step them up. We turned our large ships into huge and our huge ship into a gargantuan, and that was fine. We can't do that here, though, because we already have a full roster that goes all the way up to super colossal with the Victory class. And everything else works really well. Like, for example, the Omega class is a carrier. For that matter, so is the Nova. Those aren't changing, because those are perfect the way they are. The Hyperion being a cruiser is also perfect. Which means that the Olympus being a destroyer is also perfect. And I have no reason to change this. So then what do we do? What makes the White Star and the Olympus different? I mean, there's a lot of things really, but the primary thing about the White Star is that no ship that small had been jump capable before. So what did I do? This. I'm taking the jump engine off of it. Now, does that mean that I just broke it? No. No, it does not. The thing about the Olympus class is that we never actually saw it really being used. The Olympus class was our primary ship, or our primary capital ship during the Dilgar War, which was completely off-screen before the series even started. We also know that when humanity first met other races, and we realized that, there is faster-than-light travel, we started off by leasing jump gates from the Centauri. This is canon. This is actually explained in the movie, in the beginning, I believe. Or maybe it was, no, I think it was in the beginning. I could be wrong. Either way, oh, and JP says, why are you breaking our toys? I have a good reason for it. I'm getting to that. So we started off by leasing the jump gates from the Centauri. And that was the only way that we were able to access hyperspace. So Earth would have had a jump gate. We would have had to pay to use it. We would be able to access hyperspace that way and travel to wherever we needed to go. It would take us time before we could eventually reverse engineer the jump gates and build our own. And before we would be able to build our own jump engines. What does that mean? That means that even though we don't really have anything in canon to support this, we can make a few canon-supported speculations. And the speculation that I'm making here is that the Olympus was not jump capable. Or at least it wasn't at first. So when we went to war with the Dilgar, we would have been restricted to jump gate travel and long hauls in normal space, which is essentially the way that normal navies work now, because we cannot instantly transport a naval fleet from point A to point B. It takes time to move a fleet across the planet. The Olympus hails back to that doctrine. So what then makes the Hyperion special is that not only is it bigger, not only is it tougher, but the Hyperion is also jump capable, meaning that you could have a Hyperion fleet, maybe 2 to 3 Hyperions, supported by another 3 to 4 Olympus-class vessels, and the Hyperions can now act as the jump point for the Olympus vessels. So what does this do for us? What does this preserve? Number one, it gives us more order and structure for the human navy. We have a better idea of exactly how they're functioning. Number two, it makes the White Star absolutely special again, because the White Star is currently the smallest standard fighter, well, not fighter, but the smallest standard ship that can jump. The Jaquan and Taloth are now larger, so they're no longer part of that category, and the Olympus lost it. The White Star once again stands above. So, lots of changes that were made, but it's all for the better. I think the universe is going to be in a much better place now. So, without further ado, PC Unicorn is in. Hello, PC. Good to see you here. We're going to get back into the Centauri vessels. Now, the last time we were here and did this, we did do their fighter. We've got the Sentry class. And the Sentry class is a typical fighter. There's not much to really say about it. At least no more than any others. It is a tier 1 fighter. I think the Starfarer is a tier 1/2, so that's a little bit different. Other than that, the thruster speed is pretty much the same. It does have a slightly higher... No, actually it doesn't. The AC and target lock are the same. This one is a little bit different in that it has missiles, so that's nice. It actually has nuclear missiles, which is going to make all of my players happy. But other than that, it's a fighter. There's nothing more to really say about it. It's going to come down to the pilot, what makes it better or worse. So, we can move directly into the bigger ships for the Centauri. And they don't exactly have a whole lot of them. They have the Primus class battlecruiser and the Vorchan warship. And JP is already like, nukes! Yes, my players love nukes. Although, I mean, for as much as they love nukes, they don't let them off the chain as often as I think they normally would. Okay, so, anyway, Centauri, getting back on things. We'll come over here to the data sheets. We're going to go ahead and change both of this over to the Centauri so that we can look at them. Capital ships. See, even Blizz is like, nukes! They're all on the same ship. They all have access to the same weapons. They like nuclear weapons. Okay, so literally on the data sheets, we only have access to 2 ships because the last one is a space station. I'm not modeling a space station. Space stations are kind of boring. Although Babylon 5 was fun to make. But that was interesting. Babylon 5 really stands alone in that regard. So, they both call them cruisers. They call the Primus a battle cruiser and the Vorchan class an attack cruiser. So why don't we start with the Vorchan and try to see if we can figure out exactly what this ship is. And unfortunately, there's not much here. This is all blank. Attack cruiser, but the length, mass, crew, troops, fighters, power core, nothing. Nothing at all. So, we know what the duration is. Yay, 10 years. That doesn't give us a whole lot to work with. Armaments. 2 ion cannons, 16 twin particle arrays, 12 missiles pulse cannons? I think there should be both a space and a return there. 12, what if we say 12 missiles and then just undetermined pulse cannons and then 1 energy mine launcher? Okay. What about the Primus? Is that any better? No, it's not any better. So again, the Primus battlecruiser, at least this one gives us a length, and it says it's 735 meters. I think it's cut off on my screen. It is cut off on the screen. It says 735 meters, but it is also very wide. Now that being said, though, I mean, what is there to say about it? I know what we're going to do with it. It says it has 8 ion cannons, 4 battle laser cannons, 4 light pulse cannons, 2 missile launchers, and 1 optional mass driver. Now again, mass drivers we've been through, we're not talking about railguns here. We're talking about asteroid launchers, asteroid capture and launch systems. So the mass driver is not just optional, it's not going to be on there. So that leaves us with the 8 ion cannons, the 4 laser cannons, 4 light pulse cannons, which, as we've established, pulse cannons are basically plasma weapons. Anything pulse is plasma. And 2 missile launchers. And it does say that it is a mammoth war vessel, not as new as the Vorchan-class warship. As of 2263, the Primus was still the most powerful vessel in Centauri's Royal Navy, capable of delivering massive weapon payloads onto the battlefield. I wonder if there's anything in the wiki that I can use here. If we look at the Vorchan, this is the mainstay of it. Let's see. This has a crew of 80, which is great. Gravimetric drive, which means that they do have gravity on board. Jump capable, knew that. Weapons, primary armaments is 2 twin plasma accelerators, as well as missiles and guided mines, and it has tractor beams as defenses. But nothing on things like size. So we're going to have to... We have to make some assumptions here. I wonder... I wonder, because these ships have fought with the Narm before. And I wonder if perhaps I can find a picture of the 2 of them together. I should have another window here somewhere. I do, right there. Perfect. Let me see if I can find a picture. So, Babylon 5... And we get images here. Lots of good pictures, but I'm looking for a comparison picture if I can find one. Because I've got lots of pictures with them together. But nothing with them in combat. And if I can't get one of those, it's going to be a lot harder to determine exactly how big these things are. So, looking... You know, if I had access to, like, the actual show, I might be able to pull something out of a screenshot. But unfortunately, I don't. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything here that's giving me any kind of comparison. So, let me try this. What about the Primus? Show me the Primus class and tell me if you can give me some kind of comparison here. Just show it fighting something else. Or flying alongside something else. Or anything. Or am I going to have to completely abstract this? I'm going to have to completely abstract this, aren't I? Unfortunately, it looks like I'm going to have to. Because I see nothing. Except for some model kits. Which, while they do look nice, and model kits are always great, model kits are not great necessarily when it comes to size scaling. Because all models tend to be about the same size, and they just adjust the scaling on the box and just say, you know, this is 1/44 size, this is 1/36 size. JP asks if there are any beta sources, and the answer is no. No, there are not. You're looking at the beta source. This is the alpha source, and this is the beta source. Now, the only number that I had to go on here is the Primus class battlecruiser does in fact list itself as 735 meters long. 735 meters long is going to make it shorter than the Hyperion class, I believe. Hold on, let me look that up. Earth Alliance capital ships. Nova. No, not Nova. Hyperion. I want to look at the Hyperion. The Hyperion is 1 kilometer long. Probably because of all the little sensor masts they put on the front of it, okay? That's where they're cheating in that extra length. So the Primus class is supposedly shorter than the Hyperion, but of course this is a long and narrow ship. The Primus is much broader. Still, though, if we were to assume that, you know, you cut the length off of it and just kind of flatten it and spread it out, we could make it that size. However, that means that the Centauri are fielding, like, cruisers against the Naren's carriers. I mean, I could definitely see it happening. The Olympus says that it was 444 meters long. So, less than half the size of the Hyperion. Which makes sense. That puts the Primus in between those two. Of course, it also has these giant sensor masts on it as well. I'm just really not sure what to do with this thing. Forgive me if I'm quiet for a moment. I'm thinking about this because I gotta try and figure this out. Because these are just the most confusing ships. Since they don't give us any other information, I'm gonna have to just start making some assumptions. For starters, I think that we're gonna make the the Vorchan one size category smaller than this one, whatever it happens to be. And when we look at the Vorchan is an absolute attack craft. That's the way we see it being used. Vorchans usually travel in packs. Usually 2 to 3 of these ships, maybe 4 if they needed them. And PC says, well, the thinking explains the squeaking noise. Yeah, the hamster's getting an extra workout today. Also, haven't fed it in like a week, so it's not doing very well. Let's see. So the Vorchan attack cruiser is absolutely going to be an attack craft. We know that much. It's going to be a forward attack craft. Why don't we see if there's something that we can build that really fits that category? So let's go back to our base frames and see what we've got. First off, it cannot be a destroyer. We know that much. The Vorchan may be the most advanced Centauri ship, but it is not on par with the White Star. So it has to be, at the smallest, a huge vessel. So let's look down at huge vessels and see what we can do. The smallest frame then for a warship would be a cruiser. And for the cruiser, what do we have? We have 1 forward capital mount, 1 light, both port and starboard, and 1 heavy turret. Well, let's compare that then to what this says about it and see if that works. So, 2 ion cannons. These are the primary weapons. Now, when it says ion cannons, I don't know if that means anything to us. See, in Star Wars, anything ion is treated as an EMP weapon. That is not going to be true here, because the ion cannons, as far as we know, are incredibly dangerous and they destroy everything they hit. So, if we just take the word ion out of it, we have 2 cannons. Okay. 16 twin particle arrays. I have no idea how I'm going to model those. 12 missiles and pulse cannons, and then it has pulse cannons, and then it has energy mines. If we ignore the pulse cannons because there's no number given, that means that we have ion cannons, twin particle arrays, missiles, and mines. So that doesn't really work for the cruiser frame just because there's not enough room. Because if we go ahead and we make sure that, the port and starboard mounts match, we can put the ion cannons forward, the laser batteries port starboard, and the turret could be a missile? Although why you put a missile on a turret, I don't know. Maybe cruiser's a bad fit. The next step up, though, jumps us to the carrier and the battleship. I don't know if that's right either. We could turn the Primus into a carrier. We could make the Vorchan a battleship. I mean, they're certainly treated like battleships. Not really, actually, because again, you almost never see a Vorchan alone. Battleships are usually the centerpiece of their fleet. And I know I'm relatively certain that neither one of them is going to be a dreadnought, so I'm not really looking at that. Maybe we have to turn the cruiser turn the Vorchan into a cruiser. And apparently Blizz has to leave. Well, Blizz, it was good seeing you. Thank you for coming. And hopefully I'll catch you next time. So until then, take care. Okay, what if we did this? So according to this page, with the rules for refitting, by spending 5 build points, okay. Heavy weapons can only be mounted on medium or large. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Tiny and small starships can only have 2 weapon mounts per arc and per turret. Medium and large starships can only have 3 weapon mounts per arc and per turret. Huge and larger starships can have only 4 weapon mounts per arc and per turret. So, the cruiser is a huge, which means that the cruiser, per the rules, can have 4 weapon mounts per arc. Alright, I think that actually fixes our problem, because we can simply add the weapons on here and still stay within rules as written. So, if we come back here, let's go ahead and start filling this in. So, this is going to be Centauri. This is going to be the Vorchan and the Primus. And the size for the Vorchan is going to be huge. This one is going to be gargantuan. This frame is going to be a cruiser. And the gargantuan one... We'll think about that one. But we're going to start with the cruiser for the Vorchan. Alright, then let's start getting things filled in here. So for the cruiser, average maneuverability, which comes with no bonus. That means that the base armor class is going to be 10. Target lock is going to be 10. The critical threshold, or damage threshold, is going to be 5. So it has a little bit of mitigation. The critical threshold is going to be 36. Base hull points are going to be 180. But that, of course, will go up. Before I forget, the cruiser has a base cost of 60, not 30, 60. Mounts. So, here's where things are going to get a little bit interesting. It's going to have 1 forward mount. It says it has 2 ion cannons. However, every time we see them, they always fire linked. And so, we'll treat them as a single cannon. 1 port, 1 starboard. At least to begin with. And then it has 1 turret. But here's what I think we're going to do. Okay, we're going to move things around a little bit. This ship, I do not believe, needs a turret. So what we're going to do instead is this. We're going to give it an aft... we're going to give it an aft, and then... if we come back and we look at the page again, it says that it has 12 missiles. Now, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean that it has 12 missiles? Or 12 missile launchers? If it's 12 missile launchers, well, I'm not giving it 12 missile launchers. It's not happening. If it's 12 missiles, however, well, that can be done. So, if we go ahead and say 12 missiles, why don't we go ahead and add them port and starboard? Okay? And this, of course, is going to be our capital weapon. According to this, port and starboard are both light, and the turret is heavy. So, this is going to be light and light. We'll keep those the same, and since we took the turret off and attached it aft, we will make this one heavy. And then the computer is just going to be basic countermeasures. There's no reason to necessarily believe they have a whole bunch of countermeasures. And the sensors are going to be basic long. Last but not least, expansion space. It has 6. And we know that it has to have a hanger on it. Actually, no, I don't know that it has to have a hanger on it. That's actually a really good point. When we look at the Vorchang class, nothing on here strikes me necessarily as being a hanger. There's a couple of boxes up here on, or next to the dorsal thing that's cut off on my screen. But I mean, you can see it's got this little dorsal or ventral fin on the bottom. It's got a dorsal fin that matches. There's a couple of boxes next to it. Those could function possibly as hangers. However, when we compare it to the Primus has a great big hangar bay right on the front for launching and recovering vessels. I also don't know that I've ever necessarily seen the Vorchan with these ships. And let's not forget, when we were looking at these ships, we found out the Centauri have a completely different doctrine when it comes to fighters. Whereas every other race seems to use fighters to extend the range of influence for their vessels, the Centauri instead use them as a fighter screen. They keep their fighters operating within the range of, or within the weapons envelope of their main vessels, in order to keep them to keep their primary vessels safe. They escort. It says here, when we're talking about the Vorchan, the overview, usually its primary use is as escort for carrier fleets as a fast interceptor. Though often operating in small squadrons, they are sometimes sent out alone to carry out hit-and-run tactical strikes. This warship is also configured for atmospheric flight. Ooh. Oh, now that's interesting. Oh, that's a problem. Oh, that's a big problem. Crap. See, that's a problem because rules as written. If we go into starships, here we go. So standard navigation and astrogation. It takes roughly 1 minute per size category to start your thrusters. Traveling point to point at a planet takes 1d for hours with a starship. However, it says specifically right here, large and smaller starships can operate in a planet or planetoid's atmosphere and can travel between 2 areas in the same planet. Going into orbit and landing. It takes only a short amount of time for a large or smaller starship to lift off from a planet or planetoid surface and enter orbit, or to make a controlled landing from orbit. Huge or larger starships can be placed in orbit only around a planet, and the crew requires a shuttle or other conveyance to reach the surface. This is a problem, Because rules as written, if we take the lore, that means that the Primus battleship cannot be any larger than a large starship. The problem there is, if we do that, that again puts it in conflict with the White Star. Because I can't make them both destroyers and have the White Star still be special. That's a problem. Okay, so we got to think about this again. It means that I need to reframe things. Either I need to ignore this rule, which I don't want to ignore the rule because it's a very universal rule in Starfinder, and changing universal rules in any system is usually a bad thing. Or I had to change the White Star. That's already going to be a problem. When we were looking at the weapons here, it says that heavy weapons can only be mounted on medium or larger starships. Capital weapons can only be mounted on huge or larger starships. We already know that the White Star, we made an exception for the White Star by taking some of its weapons and piling them on or together to give us one capital weapon. Because the Destroyer had weapons that the White Star simply didn't need. I wonder if perhaps we need to bump down the White Star another size category to make this work. This is hard. Let's see. I need to look at the Primus. Can the Primus also do that? Or am I just completely screwed here? Okay, Primus. Very powerful warship compared to its contemporaries. The only real weakness is the lack of fighter bay facilities. During the last day, several of them were converted and outfitted with outlawed mass drivers. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. A very, very powerful warship compared to its contemporaries, the only real weakness of its primers is its lack of fighter bay facilities. What does that even mean? Does that mean that it's not actually a carrier? And JP says, one change breaks something else. It's like coding. No, you're absolutely right. This is a cascade failure. The Centauri are absolutely breaking everything. That feels thematic somehow. Alright, let's look at this. Let's read. Since the Primus introduction in the 2150s, the design underwent only one major upgrade starting in 22-23 and proceeding through 22-28. The ship's pulse cannon armament was upgraded to 8 twin-barrel heavy Centauri pulse cannons. While slightly older than the Vorchan-class cruiser, it was nevertheless the most powerful warship of the Centauri fleet, and in the glory days of the Republic, it was a symbol of fear for many of the younger races, save of course the Minbari, a race even the Centauri never attempted to challenge. Centauri fleets tend to be composed entirely of Primus-class ships. To make up for their lack of fighter escort, they attack in combat box composed of multiple staggered wedge formations. This allows their ships to concentrate firepower on targets directly in front of the fleet while simultaneously protecting one another from fighter attack through the use of interlocking fire. Thus, Centauri formations are only truly vulnerable to attacks from the rear. In combination with the Vorchan medium-class warship, the Centauri adopt tactics reminiscent of the Earth Alliance, which employs Nova and Hyperion-class ships, with the Primus-class cruisers providing fire support for the Vorchans, while fighters screen the attack or screen the fleet and attack vulnerable targets en masse. But where are they carrying the fighters then if the Primus is not a carrier? And for that matter, does that mean that the Vorchan are? I've got this page pulled up. It says right here, it's an escort for carrier fleets. The word is right there, carrier fleets. And is a fast interceptor, although operating in small squadrons, they run hit and run things. P says, I thought you said in a previous stream Centauri fighters launch alongside instead of being carried. As in, I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean as in they're being carried like exterior? Reread the fighter page. You know what? We're going to do that. We're going to reread the fighter page. Okay. Duplicate this tab. And JP says, this is what breaks Shadow. Yes, this is what's going to break Shadow. We're going back to the fighter. Don't have to change the fighter, I know that much. But, I mean, come on. Sentry class fighter. Okay, let's reread this. It is fast but lightly armed aerospace fighter deployed by the Centauri military. It is an aerospace fighter. Fighters can automatically operate inside an atmosphere. That's fine. Overview. Oh, PC says, no, they launch from home base and travel with. Okay. I'm not going to argue that one with you because that is entirely plausible. Here's the problem that I see with that, though. Travel takes time. See, in my Star Trek game, I had to model actual warp travel. And when we did that, I had to figure out all the warp factors and everything else like that. And so we can determine, because we have an X number of light years that we can travel per day, how many days it takes to get from point A to point B. For example, to get from like Earth to Vulcan, I think takes about 5 days or so at warp 3. Something like that. Point is, it takes time. And it takes time to travel anywhere in Babylon 5 too. We have evidence of this because there are multiple references to sending somebody home on the slowest transport they can find, as well as the fact that it takes time to travel even from some place like Earth to Babylon 5 on a transport, even going through hyperspace. Because you'd never be able to make it there in normal space. It has to be done through hyperspace, and ergo, it still takes time. The system that I am currently leaning towards, okay, the system I'm currently leaning towards, and this is going to depend very, very heavily on the scaling of the Babylon 5 galaxy, which should be scaled to our current galaxy, but we're going to have to look at that later. The current scaling that I'm going to use is that in Starship Combat, every hex that you travel on is 10 miles. So when we look at a ship, and I'll just scroll up here, and we say that this Sentry class interceptor has a thruster speed of 10. That means that it can travel 10 hexes in combat. The hexes are basically abstracted. 10 miles is essentially what we go for as a standard, just because it gives you plenty of space in case another ship has to fly through that hex. If they were only like 1 mile per hex, then you would run a higher risk of collisions. The point that I'm getting at here is that my current idea for hyperspace is that once we enter hyperspace, I'm going to convert the speed from hexes to miles to light years. So, for example, like a normal vehicle, the overland travel is usually 10 times what combat travel is. So let's say that the tiny interceptor here has a speed of 10, so it can travel 10 hexes or 100 miles per turn. That means that its traveling speed, its cruising speed, would be roughly, it would be roughly 1,000 miles per minute, actually, because Starship Combat is a minute. Now, I don't necessarily know what that speed is, but it's fast. As a matter of fact, I can just pull up my other browser here and just say miles per minute to miles per hour. So 1,000 miles per minute is... Why did I need a calculator to do this? 1,000 miles per minute is 60,000 miles per hour. Which, for a spacecraft, I think kind of makes sense. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'd have to look it up and do my research. Like I said, I'm not ready for this system yet, okay? I'm not ready to go through hyperspace. But the general idea that I had is that when they go to hyperspace, we're going to take this number and turn this into light years. So if they go 10 hexes or 100 miles in combat, in hyperspace they would go 10 light years per day. Now, that seems like a lot, but that also means that a transport might take 2 weeks to get from planet to planet, just going from jump gate to jump gate. That is too long to be in a fighter cockpit. I mean, we have crews who can stay in an aircraft, and they can stay up in the air for days at a time. But everything has a limit. I don't know necessarily if the logistics would support them being in a fighter from home base all the way to wherever they're going from. Now, that being said, okay, that being said, I don't have a better answer for you. What you said does make sense, especially if nothing else around here is a carrier. Let's go back to reading about the Sentry. Sentry fighters as well as Vorchan cruisers are part of the escort that accompanied the Centauri Emperor Turin on his visit to Babylon 5. They participated heavily in the Second Narn Centauri War. They're part of the fleet that jumped into Quadrant 14 and to establish Centauri presence after the Shadows utterly destroyed the Narn defenses in that sector. Many Sentry fighters are also present during the Centauri orbital bombardment of the Narn homeworld. They are among the ships that attended the Babylon 5 decommissioning ceremony in 2281. The fighter was specifically designed for speed, maneuverability, and easy mass production, meant to complement the large and slow Primus battlecruisers. Unlike other fighters, Sentry was not expected to engage in deep space combat independently. Instead, they were used to defend Primus formations against flank and rear attacks. Now, that right there might actually lend credence to what you were talking about. If they're not expected to engage in deep space combat independently, that could mean one of two things. Number one, they could mean completely independently, which means that they're not jump capable. And they're not meant to operate outside of a base of some kind. But that also applies to almost anything. That applies to Star Furies. That applies to the Frozzy fighters. They're not meant to. The fighter speed and maneuverability allows them to maneuver in and around the Primus formations, quickly moving to answer flanking threats with some support from the Primus' side-firing guns. Combined with its fast interception speed and the Primus' heavy firepower, making Centauri formations very difficult for opposing forces to ambush. They've also proven adept at supporting Vorchan-class medium warships, although the Vorchans themselves don't feature fighter support facilities. Okay, right there, we can say again, Vorchans, they're not carriers. So something here is wrong. Okay, something here is wrong. If the Vorchans do not feature fighter support facilities, and the Primus class, where was it? Where did it say it? The only real weakness of the Primus is its lack of fighter bay facilities. That means that this has to be wrong. It says here for the Vorchans, ships of this class were built usually primary use as an escort for carrier fleets and as fast interceptors. I have two sources that say that the Vorchan does not carry fighters, and the Primus does not carry fighters, and one reference that says that the Vorchan is an escort for carrier fleets. Because of this, I can only come to one of two conclusions. Okay? And stick with me here. I can only come to one of two conclusions. Number one, this line is wrong. Okay? Whoever wrote this wiki entry, this is wrong. Because apparently, they do not have carriers. PC says, well, from the show, support, the Emperor's ship also has a shuttle, so it must have some sort of facility. It may have a hangar. However, it may not have fighter support facilities, meaning that yes, it has a hangar because it needs to have shuttles. There has to be a way to transport people and goods to and from. But that's a bit like comparing the hangar bay on Babylon 5 to the Cobra bays. The Cobra bays are your fighter support facilities. They exist for a single purpose: to fuel, to arm, and to deploy. Just having a hangar does not automatically make you fighters. So, again, I can only make one of two assumptions here. Number one is this line is wrong, and they do not have carrier fleets. Alternately, and I don't have anything that I can do about this, even if I'm right. Alternately, the Centauri do have a carrier. It could be a very dedicated carrier. Very, very similar to a carrier vessel that we have nowadays. If you look at a typical naval carrier, the carrier has one job. Okay? One. And that is carry and launch fighters. And it does nothing else. As I have to say, it's completely undefended. I do believe that carriers will still have things like the Sea Whiz on it, and maybe even a few other defenses. But primarily, carriers don't have guns. They carry aircraft. And the fact of the matter is that any cannons that they would add would either get in the way, or they would take up valuable space that could be used for more aircraft. We've never seen a Centauri carrier. That does not necessarily mean that it doesn't exist. And PC says, right, but what's to say that the hangar can't service a fighter, albeit slowly? It could. And in a pinch, it probably did. MP says, so fighters are launched with the ship from home base and can be slowly rearmed and serviced one or two at a time. It could, maybe. I'm not sure. And, you know, maybe you're right about that, because maybe, like we said, it does have a hangar. They could carry pilots, and they could simply swap out pilots from time to time. That would actually make your idea of them being launched from home a lot more viable. They take on a fighter, they refuel, they replace the pilot, and send it back out. Which means that, given the way the Sentry looks, that is not a ship that has landing gear. Which means that probably what we're looking at is the hangar would have some kind of gantry that it would dock with. Then you can swap out your pilot and do whatever it is you need to do with it. And there you go. Yeah, I don't think either one of them is a carrier. Which means that the Primus, at the absolute most, is probably going to be a battleship. But that still does not answer the other question that we had, and that is, how big are they? So we can answer the one question now. Okay, we answer the one question. The Centauri do not have carriers. They don't have them. They don't use them, as far as we know. We're going to operate under that assumption. And we're going to go with what PC Unicorn suggested, that they will bring their fighters with them, and they will use the Primus class as a service center, and that's about it. And PC says, 0G, why does it need gear? Because in the event of a power failure, or the fact that you just might need to turn it off at some point, you need to have a way to hold it. Unless you're just talking about, like, in general flight, and you're right. In general flight, no, you don't need it to have landing gear. But it is an atmospheric-capable fighter, and it has to land eventually. Even if just to repair damage. You're not going to try and repair damage while it's floating there. Imagine if it loses its ability to hover and that thing lands on your foot. Okay, so, we've established they don't have carriers. That means that the Primus is automatically not a carrier. It could still be a battleship. In fact, battleship makes a lot of sense now. Not a carrier, though. But we still have to answer size. Because supposedly, the Vorchen can operate inside of an atmosphere. And PC says capable does not mean good at it. I get what you're saying. I get it. The fact that it can operate inside of an atmosphere is a huge problem. Here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna test something, and you're gonna come along with me for this test. Okay? We're gonna test something real quick. We are going to build ourselves another White Star. Okay? We're gonna build ourselves another White Star. I am going to build another White Star, and I'm going to set it down one more size. Just because I want to see what the White Star looks like if I make it a medium-sized ship instead of large. Okay, today is going to be a very, very different day. just because I really have no idea how else to do this. Okay, we are going to say that it's going to be a medium ship. And when it comes to medium ships, what are my options? We have the Explorer frame. The Explorer frame, this is typically what most players start off with. This has a forward weapon, port, starboard, and a turret. All of them light. Then there is a transport frame. It has a forward heavy and forward light. It has an aft light and 2 light turrets. Well, if 2 lights make a heavy and 2 heavies make a capital, the transport seems to be our best way to go. I would need to bump it up a little bit, give it that extra light weapon. However, we could turn the aft 2 turrets plus an extra weapon into 1 capital. I would need to pay for it, but it could be done. There's also the OMA. This has forward, heavy, and light. 1 light port, 1 light starboard, and 1 light aft. Basically the same problem that we would have with the transport. However, the OMA, I believe, is supposed to be a living ship. Which, given the White Star is partially Vorlon... Let's take a look at it. Does it say anything more about this? No, it does not. I wonder if I can find something in the lore. Okay, yeah. So the OMA is a creature. I'm going to copy this and duplicate here. So when it talks about the OMA starship, this is what it's talking about. The OMA is a colossal magical beast. It has a fly speed. It has immunities to both cold electricity and the vacuum because it lives in space. OMA are vast creatures, often called space whales, that travel endlessly through the inky void. They magically project electromagnetic fields that shield them from the effects of vacuum, as well as from particulate rings in dense atmosphere and clouds. So, yeah. And here we go. OMA as starships. Barathis once used an OMA as living starships, telepathically directing the creatures from within their surprisingly habitable stomachs. So, I don't have to necessarily make it a space whale, but having it being a partially living vessel actually fits with, Actually, that would be better if I just saved it for the Vorlon ships, I think. But then again... Actually, hold on, let's think about this. If we were to look forward a little bit, the Vorlons only really have 2 ships in the entire... In the entire series. So if we come up here, Vorlon Empire, we've got the Vorlon Cruiser, which is that thing in the back. That's a Vorlon Cruiser. They're very large, very powerful, very scary. Then they have their Planet Killer, but there's only like a handful of those in existence. They don't count. Otherwise, there's a Vorlon Transport. This is the one that we see the most often, because this is the ambassador ship. And one of the things about this ship is that it is actually alive. They use living technology. They are techno-organic vessels. The OMA would absolutely suffice to build this. And since this is a transport, it's the right size too. So we can call that an OMA. However, the same technology that was used to make those was also used in the Victory class and in the White Star. And I don't think the Vorlons really even have a... well, no, they do have their Vorlon fighter down here. Making the White Star into an OMA, I think, might be a nice idea. It might work. And PC says 3 fighters, a cruiser, and a planet killer. Okay, we're gonna go through this. We're gonna do this. So going back to the base frames, we'll go ahead and we'll use the OMA, I think. Maybe... No, actually I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I want to. There's not that much difference, though, between the transport and the OMA. I'm going to turn the White Star into a transport. I'm going to save the OMA for the Vorlons. The Vorlons deserve to have something special. Okay, they really, really do. And so that's what I'm going to do. So White Star is going to be a transport frame. The maneuverability is average. Which means there is no bonus and it turns 2 at a time. So armor class, that's going to be 10, 10. Damage threshold, it doesn't get 1. Hold on. Peace says you said 2, so it was just saying you forgot the fighter. Okay. Fair. They do have fight. In fact, it even lists more vessels than that, but it says a lot of them are ancient vessels, so I'm not really counting those. Okay, critical threshold for the transport is 14. It's a big step down from the 30 it had as a destroyer. Max hull points are going to be 70 for now. It does not have shields or ablative armor. Those are optional. Those are aftermarket. They will void your warranty. Jump capable. Yes, and that's going to be the really hard part that we have to deal with here. However, if this works out, I might be able to give jump capability back to the Olympus. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. This stuff is all going to carry over. That is all going to carry over. Everything over here is also going to carry over. Because none of this needs to change. Except for maybe the countermeasures. We'll look at that later because the countermeasures are going to come in with whatever points that we have left. Alright, so this is going to cost us 15. And we have 5 expansion bays. Not 50, just 5. There we go. Now, interestingly, per the rules, and again, this is this is going to get difficult. Per the rules, for a hangar, It says that hangar bays can only be installed on gargantuan and larger starships, but we have been ignoring that, putting them on large starships and huge starships. So we can still do this, or since the it only carries 4, and we have 5, or we have 5 expansion bays. We could use launch tubes. We'll have to look and see how that, or which way comes out better. Because if we look at launch tubes, and I didn't look at this the last time, but it is totally an option. Designed to fit on a medium or larger vessel, or large vessel, these tubes allow a ship to carry a single smaller vessel that can be launched at the start of any helm phase. It takes up 2 expansion bays, which is a problem for us, and can hold 1 tiny starship. If the vessel needs to dock in a launch tube during combat, it occurs at the end of the helm phase and requires a successful piloting check. We could install them. That would technically cost us more expansion space, though. But then again, rules as written, we're not even supposed to have a hangar, so I'll just go with the launch tubes. Launch tube times 4. We'll bend the rules a little bit this way. They're going to be 10 and 5, so it's going to be 40 and 20. Okay, thrusters. Let's go through these one at a time and see how this comes out. So thrusters, we're looking at an M8 or an M10. I like the M10. There's no bonus on it, which is exactly what we're looking for, and it makes the White Star a little bit faster than everything else out there. So, M10, which is a +0. And that's going to cost us what? 70 and 5. Armor, we will get to later. Power core, we will get to later. The armaments. So, the quantum discharge beam is a capital persistent particle beam cannon. Let's look at that. This is why we make notes. Alright, capital weapons. Persistent particle beam cannon. Here it is. 50 and 40. The neutron cannons are just regular particle beams in the heavy category. So particle beam is going to be 25 and 20. And the twin fusion cannons are going to be light particle beams. Where is it? Oh, light particle cannon. Here we go. 10 and 10. There's nothing for the computer. Ultra long range sensors, though. Those are going to cost a little bit. Ultra long range are going to cost us 20 build points. And am I sure the computer costs nothing? Yeah, the computer costs nothing. Okay, so let's start recalculating this then. How much power are we going to need? That's going to be 70 for the thrusters. 50 for the capital cannon. 35 for the others. And PC says, if you do that for 4 fighters, I'm naming the fighter Michelangelo, Donatello, Leonardo, and Raphael, because they're totally tubular. I'm not letting you have a white star. I know it was clever. I know it was clever, but clearly you have shown that you have an absolute lack of restraint. Okay. So, after totaling up the power, this thing needs 215 PCU for now. Now, if we add countermeasures, that may go up. But, for the time being, quite frankly, that pulse orange core looks like it's still going to be our best way to go. So we're going to copy this over. And that's going to cost us 25, because it's always 10% of the PCU. Okay, now let's calculate our build points and see how much armor we can put on it. So 15 for the frame, 5 for the thrusters, 25 for the power core, 40 for the main beam, 20 for the wing cannons, 10 for the nose cannons, and PC says, "Aw, but the White Star itself could be named Splinter." Get out. Just get out. 20 for the sensors, 20 for the launch tubes. We are not color coding them. Is 155. So currently at 155, that is going to make this ship the very peak of Tier 6. Wow. Okay, so if it's at the very peak of Tier 6, that means we're going to kick this thing up to a Tier 7. Okay? Not 7D, just Tier 7. And I do that because it's got to have some defenses on board. Okay? It's gotta. So, kicking it up to Tier 7 gives us 35 points to play with. Okay? I think? Yes? No? No. 25 points. We need to give it some armor, and we need to give it some countermeasures. And the last time I did this, the last time I had to split this up, I did it wrong. I split everything in half, and that didn't really work out right. Instead, armor. Armor is multiplicative. So it is the cost times the size category, and a medium-sized ship is 3. So the original White Star that we made had Mark V armor on it. Mark V would be 21. Okay, it'd be 21 build points, which only leaves us with 5 left, or 4 left. That may not be enough. Defensive countermeasures. The original White Star also had Mark VI countermeasures, which is 11 build points. We're not going to be able to do that. So what if we were to knock it down? I need to duplicate this again so that I can go back and forth. Yay, more tabs. Okay, if Mark V is too expensive, what about Mark IV? 5 times 3 is going to be 15. 15 leaves us with 10. And so what about... we could go with Mark 5 defenses that would cost us 8. So 15 for the armor, plus 8 for Mark 5 defenses puts us up to 23. Yeah, I think that would work. So for the armor, Mark 4 armor, that will cost us 15, and it kicks our AC up to 14, with an added benefit that that's the highest you can go before you take a penalty to your target lock. So this actually kind of works in our favor a little bit. Because now we come all the way down here and we go down to a Mark... what did it say? 5? Was it 5? Yeah, Mark 5 defenses. That is going to cost us 4 PCU and 8 build points. That will push our target lock back up to 15 again. And I just have to update these. So the build points is going to go up to 178, I believe. I think. Pretty sure that's it. And our PCU is going to go up to 219, which means that the power core still works. Everything is fine. And so we have a new medium-sized white star now. But how do we feel about it? It does get a hull bonus for a transport that is going to be 15 more. I'm just going to put that up to 85 and 85. So let's do some comparisons. So the size went down, obviously. However, the armor class only went down by 1 point, from 15 to 14. And PC says, or no, it could be Splinter. Oh, wait, no, that's because that hasn't caught up yet. PC says, maybe its defense is heavy stealth. I mean, it kind of quite literally is. Sorta, kinda. They come in, they destroy everything, they leave. It's what they do. So we lost 1 armor class. Okay, that's not bad. That's actually really, really good. 1 less armor class, most people would not shrug at that. Target lock has not changed at all. Critical or damage threshold, it didn't have one before, so it didn't lose one. Here's where things get really, really bad. Critical threshold drops from 30 to 14. That is significant. That has severely limited the amount of hits this thing can take. It also lost half of its health from 190. Actually, it lost more than half its health from 190 down to 85. So this thing is not capable of taking a whole bunch of hits, and when it does get hit, it's going to feel it extra hard. But we're keeping it jump capable because it has to be. So the weapons are still the same. This is still a medium-sized ship with a capital class weapon on it, which is absolutely insane. However, we bent the rule before to put a capital weapon on a large ship. We're not doing any more damage to the rule system. We're using the same bent rule we did before. Which means that when we talked about how the White Star is the one ship that punches well above its weight, it's now punching even higher above its weight, which may work out in our favor. I'm not sure. Everything else is the same, though, except we replaced the hangar with the launch tubes, just to make it a little bit less egregious. I still think it's going to be fine that way. Normally, this would actually require us to incur a penalty. However, I'm going to waive that penalty because I'm just going to say that it was built with these in mind. The reason why you get a penalty for additional expansion bays is because you're literally bolting them onto the outside of your ship. These would be integrated. So let me ask you then, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about this new version of the White Star? Does this seem to work? Does this make it a little bit too fragile? I mean, it can still punch. I mean, if you were in another ship and you saw a White Star coming at you, you would still have cause for concern. But now the White Star can take even fewer hits. Which, I mean, that may work because in the show, White Stars die. I mean, they really do die, and they usually don't take a whole lot of hits before they do. A White Star is kind of a glass cannon. We've just made it even glassier. JP says the White Star was able to tank hits. Yes and no. So, whether or not the White Star was able to tank hits really depended heavily on what the situation was and who was on board. Obviously, if there was a main character on board the White Star, then that ship could never die. Because your main characters can't die. I mean, in the final battle just before Earth, when Ivanova was piloting a White Star, it took a shot directly to the bridge. And it was fine. However, we also saw during the war that if a White Star got hit, it was either critically damaged or the ship was just straight up taken out. And we know that because we saw them fighting in formations. And here's the thing. Who here is familiar with TV tropes? White Stars suffer a lot from the rule of the conservation of ninjutsu. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this particular trope, I suggest that you spend more time reading on TV tropes. But the idea of conservation of ninjutsu is this. When you watch a movie, if you see a whole bunch of ninjas show up, you can rest assured that every single one of those ninjas has exactly one hit point. Okay? They will take one hit and they will go down. However, if a single ninja shows up, he will have 100 hit points. Because there is only a certain number of hit points you are allotted for ninjas, and you can either have a bunch of really weak ninjas or one really powerful ninja. And the White Stars kinda suffer in the same way. When you see a single White Star show up, especially if there's a main character on board, that is the toughest goddamn ship in the entire series. Alright? You could blow both wings off of that and cut the back end off and it will still somehow win the day. If you show an entire fleet, however, especially if they're like flying in formation, you can have 5 flying in a wedge, and incoming fire will knock out 1 or 2 of the White Stars before they even get to their target. So they suffer really badly from the whole conservation of ninjutsu thing. I do hear what you're saying. I do tend to agree that this makes it really, really fragile. At the same time, however, we did give it armor, we did give it defenses, and they're not meant to fight alone. And so the frailty is somewhat compensated for by the fact that there's more of them. So I tell you what we're going to do. We are out of time for today. I'm going to go ahead and sit with this one for a bit. If we do this, if we bump the White Star down to a medium-sized ship, first off, I don't know how we're going to fit 50 people on a medium-sized ship, but we're going to have to try and do it somehow. It means that we can make the Vorchan Centauri ship a destroyer, which makes it large, which means that it is now atmospheric capable, rules as written. And since we've already established that neither one of these ships are carriers, it doesn't need to have a hangar. I can make it large. And if it becomes large, that puts it on par with, like, say, the Olympus class in size. It also means that the Primus can become a cruiser, a proper cruiser, being huge. And that's the Centauri fleet. It's basically just destroyers and cruisers. Which kinda works. It works if you want to have just like a hit-and-run navy and you're not looking to, like, duke things out with another ship of equal size. It means that I could revert the Narn ships back to what we had before, because I haven't deleted those, they're still there. This could solve a lot of problems, but you are right, it makes the White Star a lot more fragile. So I gotta sit with it a bit, and I'd like you to sit with it a bit too. Think about what we did here today, and when we get back here next time, let me know your thoughts on it. Or let me know down in the comments below, because I'm really interested in how you think we should handle this going forward. I mean, I'm good at this, I'm good at what I do here, but even I can use some help sometimes. So let me know. Otherwise, like I said, we're kind of out of time. Nope, not that. So that can go away, and that can go away, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to get out of here. All right. Well, thank you for everybody for coming out today. I still feel bad that I missed last week, but at least we're back to the normal schedule this week. Time changes suck. I don't know why we're still doing this. I think this actually brings us back in line with the rest of the world. I'm not even sure. No, I actually think this puts us an hour ahead of the rest of the world in general. Hard to tell. Don't know. Don't care at this point. Just end daylight savings time. There, I said it. Okay, so, thank you for coming. Make sure that if you haven't subscribed already that you do that. Hit the bell icon, that way you're notified every time these videos come out. If you know somebody else who's also into Babylon 5 or Starfinder, share this video with them. But if you just like me, like what I'm doing, leave a like on the video, leave a comment down below, particularly with your thoughts on what we did here today and how we handle this going forward. But if you're going to go ahead and leave a comment, might I suggest that you go ahead and join the Discord. We have one. We are currently playing a Star Trek module on there, and you can still join it if you like. But if you want to play any games with us going forward too, whatever setting you would like to play in, come to the Discord. Go to the Behind the Screen channel, let me know what you want to play, what your availability is. And once I have enough people with the same availability, because, you know, we all have a busy adult lives, I will put together a group and we will get started. So, I hope to see you there. I hope to see you back here next week for more Babylon 5. And until then, take care.